I want to jump to this tweet here and talk about the next story in the crumbling of society. James Woods, real James Woods on Twitter, says, to the whiners who criticized a defender ending the deadly threat in a previous video, here's an example of the consequences of being defenseless to today's predators. You choose. This is a viral video. It's a story from I think a few weeks ago. A woman worked at a cell phone store and a man walked in. And she said, how can I help you? And he said, do you have... And then just started brutally beating her and I believe trying to kill her.
Yeah.
He was stomping as hard as he could on her head. She escaped. She was seriously hurt. We have this story from the Daily Mail. Shocking moment, thugs exchange gunfire on busy New York City street in the middle of the day. Reputed gang member shot in the shoulder as an unidentified gunman remains on the loose. Then we have this one. NYPD hunt for 2 thugs after a 61-year-old man is sucker punched and killed while walking down a Brooklyn street near his home. Police investigating possible drug robbery. Punched him in the face one time and he was dead.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
That's why that woman in the first video is absolutely lucky to still be alive. The damages that she sustained will probably be with her for a very long time. Might be with her for the rest of her life. When you stomp someone on the ground on their head, so many people die from that, from physical altercations. And the one thing...
But the issue here is the crime itself. Not the attack is one attack. What I'm trying to bring up is in all of these major cities, in New York especially, crime has been insane. We had that young woman on the Upper West Side, walking home when a bunch of young boys just stabbed her to death.
Right.
Yep.
She tried running, she escaped, they grabbed her again and just started stabbing her again.
Homicides in San Francisco went up 11%.
It's almost like if you advocate for defunding the police, that crime will go up.
I think what we're seeing is a demoralization. The good cops were quitting.
Yeah.
But also the cities themselves are just breaking down for a variety of reasons. The increases in crime is due to a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's due to these DAs that won't prosecute. That's why Chesaboudin, or however you pronounce his name, it got recalled. Because people were like, well, they won't do anything about it.
And then they release them back to the streets.
Right. It's all in the name of this woke equity, being fair and just. I mean, like this, you have some of these people who have been caught committing the crime and they're letting them go.
And a lot of these criminals know that they could beat someone up, they could hurt, they could do whatever they want to the population there because they can't defend themselves. In New York City, almost every common sense form of self-defense is not allowed. Whatever tools you could have to protect yourself, you can't have in New York City. So a lot of people are talking about poverty. A lot of people are talking about single-parent homes here. I think the true problem is, I mean, how do you quantify this? How can you blame it on one particular thing when it's so many other issues coming together for this kind of larger eruption of violence that there's no going back from?
No, you're absolutely right. But I also think that it comes back down to the base thing. We no longer value human life. You don't look at somebody and they have value. So, I mean, as a Christian, certainly as an ordained minister, I look at somebody that have value because they're created the image of God. So you have value just because you're a human being. We don't have that anymore. That we're moving so far away from that as a society that we no longer value somebody.
Exactly. Well, absolutely. And we're not taught to value other people. In a very bizarre, narcissistic way, we're sort of taught to value ourselves. Everything is me, and do whatever you want or need to do to get what is going to be pleasurable for you.
Right.
But there's never any emphasis put on caring for other people, ever. And so when somebody does end up, you mentioned poverty and how people will bring that up. And poverty is not really the best explanation because there are people, and there are even entire... No. I'm not saying that that's an explanation you would argue is the case or tells the full story, but there are many cultures and even entire civilizations which are radically impoverished compared to our extremely wealthy and abundant society, and they are not acting like barbarians and stabbing, children are not running around stabbing women, and men are not beating up old men on the streets or going into places of business and just savagely beating innocent women.
Right.
I love how AOC, we have this story from July of 2020 when she defends the rise in crime, saying people are stealing bread to feed their children during record unemployment.
The AOC argument.
It's like people were getting shot in the streets and she was like, they're trying to steal bread. And it's like, they just shot a guy in front of his daughter. They didn't take anything from him. Like, there's no bread there. It's not, we're not complaining about the bread theft.
No. And here's the thing too, man, that the media allows these radical left people and really all politicians, but we see the radical lying to the American people over and over and over again. And there's no accountability. None. So we're not holding people accountable. You're not holding politicians accountable. You're not holding the people accountable. Law and order is just out the window. Society falls like this. This is exactly how society falls.
I think it's weak men make hard times.
Yep.
What we're seeing is, you guys are basically saying it. No one cares for each other. There's no sense of community.
No.
Because everyone feels like everyone else is just out to get them or for them or get for themselves. So they're just like, you see these cops in Uvalde, and these cops refuse to go in. And I'm just like, because they're not thinking about their community or the betterment of civilization. They're thinking me.
Well, that or it's a breakdown of leadership too. So I mean, I know law enforcement in my community, and one of the things that they said was the people inside standing in the stack were actually listening to their commanding officer who said don't go in. That it shifted from an active shooter. It shifted from an active shooter to a hostage situation. So their protocol was very different for them.
But that information's not true. With the overwhelming amount of evidence coming forward right now, they knew it was an active shooter. They had all the evidence it was an active shooter, and they were already inside of that school, and then they just left and abandoned those children there. So that's another aspect of it that I think
it was
important to
reported they
understand
could hear the children getting shot.
Yeah.
It was reported that
I'm not giving an excuse for it. I'm just saying that's what I do
That's
believe.
their public explanation.
That's
But they've
the
been
public
lying
explanation
through.
for it.
They've been lying through their teeth though from the beginning of this.
It's crazy. I mean, the interesting story in that to me and all of that is one mom was arrested, put in handcuffs. She got released from the handcuffs,
They
jumped
tased the
the
guy,
fence, jumped the fence, rescued her 2 kids, and came back. I mean,
And she reported how there was active gunshots when the police were telling everyone that there was no active.
Then her father went in with a shotgun.
You could hear the guns.
Yeah.
Well, it was a father and a team that went in with the shield, and then went and took out the threat after disobeying orders and finally doing the thing that they should have been doing from the very beginning. But that man also waited over 30+ minutes on the scene. So. It's
crazy.
a long time.
It's
when you're hearing shooting and you're seeing that situation and people are just waiting.
But
outside.
calling for a change in legislation and calling for more legislation as a result, it just isn't the right answer. Because if legislation was actually what fixed it, it wouldn't have happened to start with. There's multiple laws broken.
You can't fix cultural problems with policy.
Nope.
And I don't see us I don't see there being a way to fix our cultural problems.
Well, I mean, and you also got to realize too, I think I said it yesterday, we can never allow times of tragedy to dictate policy. Because every time you do that, you're just opening up the future opportunity for people to actually create the tragedy, to strip you of whatever rights or freedoms you want next. I think.
This is what's happening with the gun control debate.
Yeah, totally.
It's like we're all shocked, so we're saying do something. Do what? Do something. If you don't have a plan, the meme is keep calm and carry on, not freak out and just do something.
Right.
Yeah. No,
do something is not always the answer.
Thomas Macy had some very good tweets about the legislation that they're proposing and the counter evidence to it on his public Twitter account that I think is worth considering and looking at, especially when it comes to the latest political debates surrounding this very hot button issue. And he made a lot of very good points. So,
well, if you look at historically. While you're looking at it, so historically, look at prior to 1970, there wasn't a decade, if my numbers are right, there's not a decade there was more than 10 mass shootings. Okay, so I think in 1950 there was 1, 1960 there was 6, 1970 there's 13, I think it was 32 and 42. So to me, I always want to look at what's the root cause. The root cause around all of that was absolutely a cultural shift.
Yep.
So like in 62, 63, they took prayer and Bibles out of schools. In 70s, that was when Roe v. Wade happened. And so you're having all this stuff going on with abortions. So as a society, our values shifted drastically during that time.
It's not actually the late 60s and 70s. It's the generation before, because the boomers were raised by a generation.
Right.
They had those values. Once they grew up, they enacted those values. What we're seeing now with millennials and wokeness were values instilled in them when they were like 10.
Right.
I remember being young, having all of the teachers talk about, racism being bad and civil rights, and we have to learn the true history of civil rights and everything. Well, for them, the older generation that raises us, they live through it, they experience it, oh, I get it. You then raise a younger generation on telling them you must fight racism. What happens when they grow up and most of these policies have already been made illegal? They're looking for it as hard as they can because they were raised in this world. One of the things that really impacted everybody was imagine you're 10 years old in 2008 and you're on Facebook. No, let's say 2012. Let's say 10 years ago. You're 10 years old. Say you're 8 years old. And on Facebook, all you're seeing are videos of police brutality.
Yeah.
Because that was making people money and the algorithm kept promoting it.
Yep.
If that's the only thing you see, your whole world growing up
Yeah.
from 8 to 18 was watching videos of police brutality. You turn 18 and you're freaking out. You're like, I have to vote to stop this. Their whole world is based on an algorithm. Right.
I mean,
And they go around saying the police are hunting black people.
Right.
It's like, yo, calm down, dude.
When the reality is the vast majority of all law enforcement are great people. They're willing to put themselves between you and anybody that wants to wish you harm. And that's a huge thing. We have to advocate for our police.
Gen Z is going to be the algorithm generation. Millennials grew up half and half. When we were young, we had the internet, but we didn't have these algorithms. We get into our early 20s or whatever, late 20s, and now we have these algorithms manipulating our views, but half of our lives are still built upon the previous non-social media infrastructure. Gen Z is basically growing up in an algorithmic world. Their adult lives are all algorithmic. Gen Alpha, 100% of it is.
Right.
So their worlds are all going to be completely controlled by the whims of Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and YouTube.
Yep.
When the boomers and the Gen Xers age out, this country is going to go into full-on conflict or chaos, violence, just you name it.
It'll be interesting to see the shift. There'll definitely be a shift. But I actually think the way, especially right now, as radical as, because the left isn't no longer, they're not liberals. I know liberals. They're now radicals are running the Democrat Party.
Right.
So I actually think that they're going to create a generation of truly conservative people.
Well,
that's what I believe is going to
maybe. I
happen.
think the bigger issue is that conservatives have kids and the left doesn't. And if the left doesn't win the fight, but it's true. I mean, it's
true.
scientifically
That's
true.
very true.
If the left doesn't win the fight in schools, then they are gone.
Right.
Like literally within a couple generations.
And people are pulling their kids out of school.
Right.
Right.
They're
And
putting them in
homeschooling.
private school. They're going homeschooling, which
This
I
is
would advocate for.
This is it right here. If you homeschool your kids, that's it. If every single post-liberal, moderate, centrist, libertarian, conservative said, I'm going to homeschool my kids, within 3 generations, all of the left is gone.
Oh, yeah.
Completely. So what people don't understand, these big shifts you mentioned, like in the 70s with Roe v. Wade, what's really happening is that power is held by people in society. That power is used to control and spread messages or enact policy. Typically, the older generation controls a disproportionate amount of wealth. Right now, boomers control more wealth than the previous generation did when they were the same age as millennials. Basically, millennials should be holding, I think, like 20 or 30% of wealth. They hold like 3. Boomers hold like 25 or something. I was reading some report on this. What's going to happen is boomers are going to slowly start dying. They're getting old. When they do, that wealth and power will transfer to a millennial or to a Gen Xer. Probably from a boomer to a millennial, maybe some younger Zennial types, people who are in their early 40s. When that starts happening, that power will be wielded as per the ideology of the younger people.
Yeah.
And these younger people, according to the SPLC, favor political assassinations more so. So if $1 billion is held by someone who's 80 years old, they're not going to be spending it towards extremism.
Right.
If they die and that wealth transfers to their 5 young heirs who are more likely to believe in violence, that wealth will now be utilized in that direction. It's not that a society over time decides, like a lot of people think that there's a guy named Bob, and Bob one day turns on the YouTube and goes, wow, I have been radicalized, and then grabs a tiki torch and goes outside. What really happens is that Bob sees the YouTube videos and goes, wow, that's crazy. And then Bob tells his kid, and he says, you see this stuff, man, life shouldn't be this way. Then that kid grows up, grabs a tiki torch and goes outside.
Right.
It's when the older generation dies off, that shift we see isn't that society has decided something like a person's mind changed. It's that the people of certain values no longer live and the power transfers to those of different ideas.
Yep. That's why I advocate for values.
Exactly.
Faith, family, freedom. These are the 3 things that I think that are building blocks for our society. Historically, it's what made us a great nation. If we come back to those things, I really do believe that's the hope for our future.
Is there any way to politically achieve those? What kind of things would you propose, legislation or action plans that would help bring that forward?
Well, first, I mean, I would absolutely put forth legislation codifying parental rights, saying that parents have rights over their children's medical and education decisions. And in that, I think that the money for education should follow the student. So whether a parent decides they're going to go to public school, they're going to private school, or they're going to homeschool it, whatever that money is that goes to those students, that credit goes to that student.
Yeah,
no
New
matter where they
Hampshire
go.
already does this.
It should.
Yeah.
I mean, that, and it should be
program?
federally. Yeah, I mean, federally, that should happen. If we're going to put money in to the government because we want to take care of the education of our children, they should follow our kids wherever they go.
Of course.
That makes sense to me.
Well, Donald Trump proposed the voucher system.
Right. Yeah,
Which
the voucher's great.
I absolutely agree with.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know if it's the the true like the one solution to helping kids with schools and fixing the school problems. But
I mean, dissolving the Department of Education and pushing that down to the state levels is a huge start.
yeah.
Yeah. Also, I mean, look, it's not just the fact that children would no longer be indoctrinated in the same way if parents had any choice about where they could send their children to school, but also we would probably end up achieving at a higher level with respect to education, generally speaking, if schools had to compete for students.
Absolutely.
And so what the left will say when they argue against school choice, and this is such an unbelievable self-own, but they'll say, you only advocate for school choice because you want to bankrupt public schools. All right, well, you're admitting parents would send their kid anywhere else if they had a choice.
Yeah, the public schools are that bad. Make them better.
Exactly. So it's like, well, school choice wouldn't be a threat
Right.
if we had public schools which were decently run and you wanted to
right.
put the effort into making them function decently. Parents should have a choice where their kid goes ultimately.
Public schools are a net negative on your children.
Yeah,
Period.
100%.
Parents don't want their children indoctrinated. They want your child. We want our children to be educated. The basics. You know what? Reading, writing, arithmetic. I mean, STEM studies. These are the basic things that we want for our kids. We don't want them indoctrinated. Growing up, honestly, I mean, I did not know where most of my teachers landed politically, and that's how it should be. You're there to teach me a subject, and that's it. Help me learn. Let me learn how to learn, rather than just shoving something down my throat. That's what we want for our kids. We don't want them indoctrinated.
But that's what's happening.
It is 100% what's happening.
And for a lot of people, it's not as easy to just get your kids out of school because
No, it's expensive.
Well, it's
Why we
basically
need school
daycare.
choice.
Right. Well, yeah, there is that, but it's also
see,
expensive.
All of these things are connected to each other. When women enter the workforce, at first it was you can work if you want to, which is true and correct, equal opportunity. But then all of a sudden the workforce doubles. And now some guy goes to apply for a job and the boss says, look, this guy over here, he's got a wife who's working. He doesn't need as much money.
Right.
I'm not going to pay you what you're asking for. And the guy says, okay, I'll go down. Now all of a sudden the guy comes home and says, honey, I got the job. Bad news. You need to start working because we're not going to have enough money.
Right.
Now she's working. Who's raising the kids? They got to go to daycare. Fortunately, public schools, they can drop their kids off and say someone else will take care of it.
Yep. The more workers, the more you're able to pay them less because there's more competition for that market. And this is why, there's individuals like David Rockefeller that were huge proponents of this larger movement when it came to allowing women to work, because he knew that it would allow him and his factories and his businesses to earn a lot more money. And I think that's another aspect to really understand here, especially with his kind of formation of the education system that we're under right now.
What we need is pod schooling.
Yes.
I hear we were talking with one of our guests that it was not that easy, but women can and should be at work if they want to be. I think equal opportunity is fantastic. And then your kids, if you need someone to watch them, you shouldn't put them in an institutionalized learning facility where you don't know the teachers. You should get someone you know and trust, have them come together for your community and teach this. This one person can do it all.
I just want to make this point. There's a great quote from Chesterton. He said that feminism is the muddled idea that women are free when they serve their employers and slaves when they serve their husbands.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, it is correct that women should be allowed to do whatever they want, but I think that the cultural imperative right now is that women should want to be cogs in the machine, like Chesterton talks about. They're told that they should want to serve an employer,
Right.
not be a slave to their children. And you can listen to the narrative that moms nowadays have about their kids. They're like, I can't stand being around my kids. I can't imagine how you homeschool. I'm so glad when they leave for the day. And it's like, why did you have children? What was your thinking? You obviously aren't in the right mindset to be like, okay, I want to raise kids. Here's what I'm going to do. It's really important to bring them up correctly. They just hand them off to the nearest person, which tends to be the state. It's a huge problem. I hate the mindset, and I hate that the culture has made it so that women are incentivized to leave their families and go back to work.
Well, we don't see children as a gift anymore either.
Right.
I mean, one of my favorite things is being a father. I really see once a great responsibility to raise up a human being to take over into society.
Yes.
But to me, I think that we have to see children as a gift. That's what they are. That is the next generation. That's who's going to take over the country. It's going to take over the world. It's such a huge responsibility, but a huge privilege to get to raise somebody and teach them and guide them in life.
I got an idea for a form of government where the law is applied to you as you wish it to be applied to others. That's it.
Simple.
There you go.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's like, I think violence is wrong, then if someone commits violence against you, then that person will be criminally charged. If you commit violence against someone else, you will be criminally charged. If someone else, say like an Antifa person, says, well, I believe it's justified, then someone comes and fights you, there's no law to be applied because you don't find a problem with it. Right? I mean, I'm half kidding, but you get the idea.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. Go ahead.
Oh no, I just wanted to piggyback on something you said because you know you're a father, you have children. I don't. But one thing that I have always found very sad about this culture is just the way having children is viewed. It's strange because people will point out that having kids is hard work,
Right,
and then they'll
burden.
say therefore it's not worth it. But we don't really do that with anything else. I mean, we're starting to in some areas, but imagine going like, well, I don't want to become rich because being rich is hard work. Only suckers do hard work. But that's basically the attitude that our society has cultivated when it comes to children. It's like,
Right.
well, it's hard work, so screw that. Why do it?
But that does carry over into everything.
I think it started to.
So I've seen it. So as a small business owner, I've had so many people go, "Whoa, man, you're really lucky." What do you mean really lucky?
Yeah.
Sacrificed years of my life. Do you know how much times I miss with my with my kids, or even with my parents? How much time I've missed with my family in order to be able to. And luckily, we do a lot of it together as a family. You know, as far as building out our studio and everything else. But there are some things you're just going to spend time away from your family in order to do it. So it's not just this. Oh, you just get it. So, but people aren't willing to do the hard work. Same thing with kids, though. They're seen as a sacrifice. Oh, I want to have to give up. What are you talking about? This is such a gift that you get to have influence in somebody else's life, and you get to guide them in life. It's such a gift.
And think about once they're, like 9 years old and they can start washing the dishes.
It's great.
That's right.
I remember the first time that my oldest son cut the grass. I took a picture. I sent it to my dad. I was like, "Oh, this is what it was all about."
great,
He's
yes.
like, "You made it, son."
Yeah.
I just whenever I see someone work really hard at something, I admire it. And so, like, as someone without kids, when I see someone with kids who's working hard to raise them, what it says to me is if they're willing to put that kind of effort in, it must really be worth it.
It is.
But for whatever reason, we don't look at things that way anymore. We see someone putting hard work in and we go, oh, they're a sucker. They're putting hard work in, instead of saying, well, maybe they're putting hard work in because there's a significant reward here. There's something bigger than that.
They're missing out.
Another huge problem with the millennial generation and younger is the entitlement.
Sure.
No hard work. I hear it all the time. If only I had X, then I could do it. If only I had
Ew.
money. And I'm just like, wow.
As an employer, I can tell you that that's true.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and I value somebody that's willing to do the hard work. I tell my boys all the time. I said, listen, in the future, when you're in the working class, if you will show up on time, just simply do your job and have a good attitude, you'll be a superstar.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast. And there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and we'll see you all there.